can't think of something more foundational to following Christ than, first of all, making him number one in our life, and then truly, and when I say truly, I mean truly following him. But what does it mean to actually be a true disciple of Christ? What does it even look like is what I want to talk about. And ultimately, a true disciple of Christ is someone who looks more and more like Christ, someone who makes a commitment to continually die to self, pick up their cross, and then continue to follow him wherever he may lead them. And Jesus gives us many examples of what one of his true disciples looks like and acts like. And out of all the examples recorded in the Bible, one of the most clear and straightforward examples of this is found in the Beatitudes from Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. And it's from chapter 5, verses 1 through 12 is what I'm going to read. Seeing the crowds, he went up on the mountain and he sat down. His disciples came to him. And he opened his mouth and taught them, saying, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven, for so they persecuted the prophets who were before you. Here, Jesus lays out the characteristics of the ideal subject of his kingdom, and characteristics that Jesus himself embodied perfectly, I might add to that. You see, in verses 1 and 2, they start by saying his disciples came to him and he began to teach them. You see, this message was not for everyone. It was for his disciples. What Jesus was about to lay out in the next verses would only make sense to those who have let go of that worldly pursuit of treasure and submitted themselves to the upside down kingdom of Christ. And we'll talk about how upside down that really is. So from here, the Beatitudes can be divided into two main groups. The first group is what we're going to call passive personal qualities. And then the second group is going to be active social qualities. So in this message today, I'm going to be covering the passive personal qualities only. So let's get into it. The four passive personal qualities of a disciple are someone who is poor in spirit, someone who mourns, someone who is meek, and someone who has a deep hunger and thirst for righteousness. So let's take a closer look at what each of these qualities actually mean. Verse 3, Jesus says, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. See, Jesus is looking for his disciples to know how spiritually inadequate they actually are. The disciple who is spiritually bankrupt is then cast back on God and draws on his limitless resources. And you see how upside down this is. It's absolutely beautiful. In a world that wants us to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps and keep on grinding, Jesus is telling us we cannot rely on ourselves, but we can always rely on him. Next, we get into verse 4. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Jesus is looking for his disciples to be spiritually contrite. A disciple whose mourning is over sin and failure and over the slowness of our growth and likeness to get to Christ. No one attains maturity without the experience of sorrow, but this doesn't mean to stay in the sorrow forever, because Jesus then tells us that those who mourn will be comforted. I love the Apostle Paul, how he explains this beautifully in 2 Corinthians chapter 7, if you want to read more. And then next, Jesus moves into the third passive personal quality when he says, Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Jesus is looking for his disciples to be spiritually humble. And I love this quote by J. Oswald Sanders. He says, humility is an exotic flower in our sooty and smoggy world. It is no native of earth and is little esteemed by man in general. The meekness Jesus calls his disciples to be is not weakness. It is energy and power that is controlled and directed. And lastly, in verse 6, Jesus says, Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Jesus is looking for his disciples to be craving a right relationship with God. Another quote from Sanders says, "The truly blessed person is the one who hungers and thirsts after God himself, not only the blessings he gives." And I think Psalm 42:1 says it so perfectly. As a deer pants for streams of water, so my soul pants for you, oh God. I absolutely love that. And I pray that this gives you more knowledge of who Jesus calls you to be in him as a disciple. But I pray that you do not end with just knowledge, because knowledge or willpower or any effort of our own doing will not transform us into a true disciple of Christ. Only the Spirit's work in us can do that. We must commit continually submitting to him.